Edie, and where were you born?
Born in Gunnedah, Nimmerlong Hospital, private hospital in Gunnedah. Dr. Edison was here those days, straight out of the army, First War.
And you grew up?
Grew up in Gunnedah or in the area. Went to school at a little school, one-room school out at Nose Hiding, and I went there till 6th class. Went away to MLC at Burwood in Sydney for a while. Then Jack Lang was the head, and my father didn't like his way of doing things. Pulled me out of Sydney and I went up to Negs at Armidale, finished my education up there.
And then you came back to the farm. How did you meet George, your husband?
Well, he came out from England at 16 with a crowd of boys who were taken up to Inverell, and they lived up there on a property for a while. He finally came to Curlewis with some friends that was on the railway, got moved to Curlewis, and he worked around there, and of course I met him down there, and then after the war we were married. He went away in the overseas, and I was in the army just in Australia, and then we were married at the end of November 44, I think.
Yep.
And we moved into Lauriston and lived there until his health failed and he was in hospital. I bought a house in Gunnedah, and he was buried in the Wantabar Road Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And a place there for me, and the next week too.
No, it's not. Edie. Edie, can you tell me about your dad, John, and what he had to do with setting up the Curlewis Farmers Co-op?
Yes, he had no education at all. Grew up in Victoria, down around Albany area. Albury, Shepparton, there were cabinets all through that area. And then he came up here, something I don't know what it was, and he bought property at Curlewis, Nay, and he was married. My mother came from Dalesford, so they both came from Victoria, met in Gunnedah and were married here. And
it says here that your dad was a former member of the Australian Wheat Board and,
yes.
and a chairman of the New South Wales Ag Bureau.
Yes, he was in all those sort of things. He did a lot of public work, and that was what he liked doing. He was a good farmer, and he bought the first land from Pullman Station on the plains at No Siding, and it was the first one to grow wheat on the black soil.
He won a lot of awards at Sydney Show for his wheat, didn't he?
Oh yes, he won all the prizes. There's cups, stack of cups, these great big things that we were presented with in those days. There's one in the house in town, but all the rest, a lot of the rest, after a few years, my mother complained about the cups, and they started giving you boxes of cutlery and, china or something like that instead of a cup. It's much more useful.
Yes. And how did your dad organise the first ag quit?
Well, he did all the organisation. We had the old phone on the wall, the big phone, still in the house in town, and he organised started the co-op out there at Nay, with a few of the locals, and then they moved into Gunnedah opposite the railway station, and then they bought the old town hall down there, and moved into that. And he was chairman up till very late in life. He retired. But, I don't know what it's gone to pack now, hasn't it? It's gone.
It's another shop now, yeah, that's
Yes.
it. It just says here that Jim O'Reilly, who was the former supervisor of the agricultural department, writes that Jack Kavanagh of Kaluas was a truly great Australian.
Yeah, well, Jim O'Reilly was the first agronomist. And it wasn't actually the first. Macaulay was the first one, but only for a few months. Then Jim O'Reilly came, and he stayed here for years and built up the cropping business. But,
That's amazing. Okay. Edie, do you want to tell us about how you used to ride the horses in for music lessons each morning? And
yeah, I used to ride from home at Nayside, where we lived up on the hill, and ride into Kaluas, have a music lesson. Woman came down from Gunnedah on the train. We had a lesson. I rode the horse back, get back at school at 9 o'clock in the morning, go to school, and that was go home at night. And well, mostly I think I used to go down the corner of the property, a bit of timber, a lot of rabbits, and I had a gun, 22. And I used to go down there and shoot rabbits for the dogs.
what about when you used to go riding with your dad, and your mum used to rouse on your dad for giving you the wild horses, and so you'd ride off on your little pony, and what would happen then?
You'd start off, he was on the big horse, and I was on the pony. We'd get down to the gate, the edge of the property, and he'd say, get off and get on this horse, and I'd ride that horse, and he'd ride the little one, go down to the plains, where it's about 4 miles away, and work out there all day on the horses, and home at night. But
You'd swap back over just before you got home, so that you'd swap back over just before you got home, so your mum would think you'd been riding the pony.
oh, she didn't know I'd ever rode the head big horse, no.
What about some of your accidents on the horses? You've had some pretty crazy ones.
I've had some few unconscious ones. One out on Springhurst, which was another property we owned, and the horse got tangled up in the cocky gates, and trying to get off, I got kicked and broke my leg. Anyhow, I set my dog off, and it went down to the neighbour's house, and they knew there was something. The dog brought them back. We got an ambulance out, and I finished up in hospital, of course, broken leg. But that was normal life in those days. You went out for the day, you rode off in the morning, and around about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and you'd get home at dark at night.
There used to be a lot of people come for meals at your house, didn't there?
Oh yes, my mother was always cooking, and so we had.
How many people were working for them at the time?
Well, there used to be up to 6 and 8 there at times, and there was always about 4, and they lived. My father, when he bought the place, there was an old 2-bedroom veranda house there, and then he built a 4-bedroom house. Never been trained or anything, he just built the house, and they moved into there, and I was born before they moved into the new house. But we lived there then until I went away to boarding school, of course. And
when you joined the army and you had to go around, you had to do training then. What kind of training did you have to do?
Oh, we had ordinary training, marching, walking around, doing drill and all the rest of it, taking drills, but plasters.
And so what was your job in the army though?
Well, tutoring mainly. As the new ones came in, I was one of the first. About 6 of us were taken into the army to start off, and then we trained other people as they came in.
Was that just to make sure everybody stayed fit and healthy?
Everybody had to know, do their own marching, you had to march and do all that sort of thing. Typical army life. But
tell us about when you lived in Sydney. I remember there's a painting on your wall, and I asked you one day what it meant, and you told me that was the view.
Well, 3 or 4 of us got together, and we rented a house over at Tremorne on the point there. There was hardly any houses there then, and we used to come across on the ferry, of course, to the city, and we all spread out and went all over New South Wales, and I did a lot went to South Australia and Queensland taking people to start classes up in those areas. I did that for quite some time.
Where were some of the places that you got posted to?
I started classes at Tamworth, because it was a long way away in those days, the horse sulky days, and then the old Ford. My father had the first Ford car out here, and I learned to drive that. I used to drive that when I was started off. I couldn't even reach the pedals, but I'd have to steer it. And he had the first Ford car out there. And then after that he bought a Studebaker car, and it was huge. And he had that for years and years, he kept it. And I think the first car I had was a Ford, and no curtains on the side, no windows. Just put these curtains up to keep the weather out. And then we got the more modern ones, of course. And he always had a Studebaker. It was an imported car, of course, and it was a big car. It was good, just take everybody wherever we went.
What type of car did you and George have when you were married?
We bought a Hillman. It was the only car we could get at the time, the only car available. So we had to have a Hillman. It was only a little car. We had that for a good few years, and then I think we bought a Ford, and then we bought a Studebaker. And going back to my father's ideas. And we had that for years.
Yeah. Do you remember what you were doing the day that the war ended?
I was working in Sydney, with the Ag Bureau, and starting classes for girls, young people around the state.
How did you feel when you heard that the war was over?
Oh, it was a very exciting time.
Where was George at that time?
George was still up in he'd been overseas in the Middle East. He'd come back to Adelaide and then been sent up to Merauke, New Guinea, and he finally, the army was closed down. He was one of the last ones to come out of the army, I think. And he came home. And we were married at the end of 44 and lived on the property from then on. And he died in Oh, did he die? 66,
6?
66, and then he's buried down here in the cemetery on the Malelli Road.
Did George pass away? No, didn't George pass away in...
Hospital.
Yeah.
He was
In 85.
85. Yeah.
85 he passed away.
Around about that time.
Because Dale was 5 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 5.
Yep.
That's right. And,
Yep.